I was always proud to tell the story of my grandfather, the Russian revolutionary. He bravely eluded the Tsar's police in the dead of night, slipped across the Black Sea from Odessa into Turkey, and landed on Ellis Island in 1911 with his young wife, who was pregnant with my father. That was pretty much all I knew about my Russian heritage. There was so much more family history on my mother's side, the Scottish and English Protestants who came here in the 1700s and 1800s. The wealth of ancestral lore was almost overwhelming. Family trees, bundles of ancient letters, my great-grandfather's diaries, even a book chronicling my Scottish progenitors, written by some great uncles of mine. There were photographs, albums and albums of photographs, as well as framed portraits on the wall above my mother's desk. My father had no photo albums. How could he? His parents were immigrants who fled in the night. All I ever saw was a framed picture on his dresser, a group photo depicting his father as a teenage boy at a trade school for Jews. I wanted to know more. So my father told me my grandfather was a socialist revolutionary who, with his comrades, leaned out the windows of buildings and dropped bombs right in front of the Tsarist troops marching in the street below. They'd drop a second bomb at the rear, trapping the men, and then a third bomb right in the middle. No wonder he had to flee. My grandfather was an enigma. In Russia, he'd been a freedom fighter, or a terrorist, depending on your point of view. But here in America, he worked as a tool and die maker, raised a family of 4 children, and lived in a comfortable house with a sun porch. When I was 16, my parents divorced, and shortly afterwards, my father died. The past seemed closed to me. I lost my father, and I lost touch with his family. But after 30 years, I found myself reunited with them in Cleveland, where he had grown up. Suddenly, my immigrant family came into view. There were photo albums, after all, full of pictures taken in Russia, in Germany, and in France. One cousin they called the Rota, the redhead. Another was a well-known singer. My grandfather was handsome in his youth. There was a family history. I learned more. My grandmother was an expert seamstress. My grandfather was not just a tool and die maker. He invented the swing-top trash can. He was offered a job as a designer in Chicago, moved his family there, saw a sign at the factory gate announcing "No Jews," and went back to being a tool and die maker in Cleveland. A few years ago, I got in touch with my father's French cousin, Eugenie, who lived in a suburb of New York. My father helped her to come here after World War II, and she adored him. We spent hours exchanging stories. As she filled in the family tree for me, the yin and yang of my WASP and Jewish backgrounds felt more balanced. At one point, I mentioned my grandfather, the socialist, escaping the Tsar's police. I had always wondered if the story of the brave revolutionary getting out in the nick of time was a complete fabrication, something said to impress his children, perhaps, or if it really did happen. I had learned it was true that as a 16-year-old, during the pogroms of 1905, he acted as a messenger for the resisting Jews. But when I asked about the daring escape, Eugenie's eyes grew wide. She started to speak. She hesitated. Her mother was my grandfather's sister, and she knew all about the flight from Odessa. "Oh, yes," she said, about to put everything into perspective. "Your grandmother was pregnant when they arrived here." She paused. "But they weren't married. That's why they ran away."